In this video, we're going to rank every single non-sunset pulse rifle into a tier list for PvP. You've asked for this to become a series, and I'm happy to deliver. Oh, and by the way, if you're interested in what I think about the place of pulse rifles in the current meta, I'll mention that at the end of the video. Let's dive in, starting with the Bad Juju. Bad Juju is an exotic pulse rifle in the kinetic slot which belongs to the 450 RPM lightweight archetype. Except, it's not lightweight. Yeah, it doesn't buff your movement speed at all. It is hipfire grip, full auto trigger, and a souped up version of Subsistence and Rampage, which is all quite nice. Also, Bad Juju gives you a decent chunk of your super energy on kill with the perk String of Curses. Unfortunately, the damage model of the lightweight pulse rifles requires you to land 8 headshots to get a kill in 0.87 seconds, which is the same as a 140 RPM hand cannon. However, that's without the intrinsic benefits provided by a hand cannon like peak shooting and aerial play. Admittedly, the lightweight damage model does allow for a 12-shot body shot kill in 1.33 seconds, which is actually quite nice, but you shouldn't really be counting on hitting all body shots to win duels, especially in the current meta with 120 RPM hand cannons 2-tapping everyone in sight. With the bad damage model and no consistency perks and a mediocre 60 aim assist, we're going to rank Bad Juju in the C tier. Chattering Bone is a legendary pulse rifle in the kinetic slot which also belongs to the 450 RPM lightweight archetype. Again, the damage model of these pulses is really quite bad, requiring high precision but without great reward. Hitting all headshots with a high impact pulse like the Messenger grants you a time to kill of 0.67 seconds, while landing all headshots with a Chattering Bone is a fifth of a second slower at 0.87 seconds. Unlike the Bad Juju, the lightweight frame on this pulse actually does grant you a significant mobility boost, which is nice. It also has a great aesthetic and a decent 71 aim assist stat, meaning that it's pretty magnetic. Having kill clip on the curated version of this pulse will also allow you to secure a kill in just 6 headshots at low resiliences. This pulse rifle is also a decent option for hunters looking to min-max their build with the bonus mobility stat, since lightweight hand cannons no longer exist. Also, the Chattering Bone does get rangefinder along with Rampage, which is a nice combination since Rampage will increase the leniency of Chattering Bone and rangefinder buffs its range and magnetism. However, in testing, I felt the effective range was quite shallow. This is definitely a close to mid-range dueling pulse rifle, not something you want to use from very far away. Overall, I'd say most other pulse rifles will be better options here, which is why I'm going to rank the Chattering Bone in the C tier just like Bad Juju. I think you could make an argument for B tier for hunters looking to take advantage of that bonus mobility stat. Cold Denial is a kinetic pulse rifle belonging to the 340 RPM high impact archetype introduced to us in Season of Arrivals. If you watch my recent Messenger video, you know that this archetype of pulse rifle inherently has a weaker version of a firmly planted perk, which is nice. Cold Denial comes with a lot of strong lethality perks like Killing Wind and Multi-Kill Clip, which can make it deadly in the right hands. It's also a special pulse rifle since it has an abnormally low zoom stat. It actually shares the same zoom level as hand cannons at 14, which is really nice if you like to main a non-rangefinder hand cannon. While the low zoom stat does provide you with a much wider view while aiming down sights, it also has the downside of significantly reducing the Cold Denial's range. On a 340 RPM pulse rifle, which excels when it's able to reach that optimal time to kill, this range reduction feels really harsh, though the clean sights and good perks do combat that to a large extent. Overall, I think this is a really solid pulse rifle and I'm going to rank it in the A tier. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, maybe subscribe. It's free to do and you can always change your mind later. Graviton Lance is an exotic scout rifle, pulse rifle in the energy slot. Seriously though, Graviton Lance is quite unique since it doesn't experience damage drop off on the big bullet. It also occupies its own archetype since it shoots 2 shots in a burst instead of the normal 3. These shots come out quickly and the second one does significantly more damage. To me, Graviton has always felt left behind from year 1 when all the time to kill values changed except for poor Graviton. However, it is still fun to use and the mini Nova bombs that come out after a kill are incredibly satisfying to see, especially if they manage to get you a collateral kill. In the current meta, there's simply no way that you're going to use a weapon which kills as slow as a 120 hand cannon with the precision requirement of a high impact pulse. Yeah, the fact that your enemies explode on kill and spawn void projectiles is really cool, but if you can't get that kill to begin with, you're in a bad spot. This is why we're going to put Graviton Lance down in the D tier. The Gridskipper is a brand new rapid fire pulse rifle which is brought to us in the Season of the Splicer. This pulse rifle is almost like an upgrade to one of my previous favorite pulses, Claws of the Wolf. This is because it comes with some slightly better stats, slightly higher zoom factor, and a renewed perk pool. Yet it does lack one critical feature, which is kill clip. More on that in a bit. I can imagine that many of you might rate this pulse quite differently since the scope is kind of awkward, and it's a rapid fire archetype which seems to be kind of hit and miss with the community. The Gridskipper can roll with multi-kill clip along with a new perk Tunnel Vision, which increases aim assist after a kill and a reload. If you manage to get 2 kills before reloading, multi-kill clip can 2-burst opponents, which is awesome. However, I would prefer regular kill clip to make gaining that much of a damage boost a bit easier to pull off. Unfortunately though, it can't roll with regular kill clip. I've seen mixed reactions to this pulse so far. Many people seem to be praising it as the best pulse rifle in the game, while others seem to think it's not so hot. Personally, after using it for a while with a great roll, I did enjoy it, but I didn't feel like it was quite up to par with some of the pulses that we have in the A and S tier on this list. Therefore, I'm going to put the Gridskipper in the A- tier, since the rapid archetype does suffer against those more dominant pulse rifles. However, personally, I do think the Gridskipper feels a bit better than all pulses in the B tier. Hailing Confusion is a legendary pulse rifle belonging to the adaptive 390 archetype. These pulses are known for their lenient 0.93 second time to kill, requiring only 5 headshots and 2 body shots. For a 3-burst kill, you only need to land 3 of the 9 shots as a headshot to kill even a max resilience guardian. 390 RPM pulses excel when they can get any damage perk, since they can 2-burst opponents for a very fast time to kill. This is one of the reasons that pulses like Bygones were so strong in past metas. A 2-burst kill was just nasty. Unfortunately, Hailing Confusion can't roll with any damage perks, which is a big downside on this particular archetype. While the Hailing Confusion does get some nice consistency perks and the ability to roll Wellspring, which opens up some interesting build options, as well as a nice scope that highlights targets, the lack of a damage perk on a 390 RPM pulse is just a significant downside. This is why we're going to rank the Hailing Confusion in the B tier. The Jian 7 is another 390 RPM pulse rifle, this time in the energy slot. Unlike the pulses before, this one features scopes instead of barrels. Scopes can alter a weapon's zoom level, but they can't fix the recoil direction, which is why you should probably run a counterbalance mod on the Jian. The scopes on the Jian do allow it to challenge significantly longer ranges than traditional 390 RPM pulses, since increasing the zoom level also increases the range. The Jian can also roll Swashbuckler, which is a great damage perk. I know you're unlikely to be running around punching people using a pulse rifle, but this works particularly well with a solid range melee like a Hunter Throwing Knife or Celestial Fire on a Dawnblade. The reason why Swashbuckler is so good is that it lasts for 5 seconds, unlike Rampage, which only lasts for 3.5. Only 1 stack of Swashbuckler is enough to 2-burst anyone regardless of resilience with 6 headshots. Overall, the Jian 7 is a very good pulse rifle, but not spectacular, which is why I rank it in the A- tier. Of course, unless your enemy is using Risk Runner, in which case I would avoid this thing. The last Perdition is a pulse rifle very similar to the Jian 7. It also gets scopes instead of barrels and has some crazy good perks. Last Perdition also rolls with Kill Clip, which is generally speaking the best damage perk for PvP. It can also roll with some nice consistency perks like Moving Target. Overall, it's a solid pulse rifle, but the 390 archetype struggles a bit with that non-boosted time to kill value. One could argue that the Last Perdition is slightly better than the Jian, but these two pulses are so close that I'm going to also rank Last Perdition in the A- tier, just like its arc-flavored buddy, the Jian. Next up is the No Time to Explain.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
Okay, on to the next pulse rifle. Okay, I guess I have time to explain. No Time to Explain is an exotic 340 RPM pulse rifle in the kinetic slot, which is quite similar to the Messenger in that it has really high base stats. The exotic perk of No Time to Explain returns every headshot you land to your magazine, meaning that even with a small mag size of No Time, you can actually keep shooting for quite a long time. Also, you collect stacks of Rewind again every time you get headshots, and at 10 stacks you spawn a little buddy that shoots with you. This little buddy fires quite aggressively at the target closest to your reticle. No Time to Explain also comes with full auto trigger, which is basically just a welcome ease of use perk. All in all, No Time to Explain can kill just as fast as the Messenger in the right circumstances, and it's a great pulse especially for long ranges. This is why I'm going to rank it up in the S tier. Outbreak Perfected is yet another 450 RPM lightweight pulse rifle, which doesn't actually get the lightweight frame bonus to mobility. However, Outbreak does make up for it. Outbreak's the only pulse rifle which has dynamic sway reduction, a perk normally found on auto rifles as a hidden perk. This means that Outbreak as you fire it becomes increasingly stable, making it easier to aim. While the damage model of lightweight pulses is pretty bad, Outbreak is so easy to aim that it kind of makes up for it. While getting clips for this video, I found it quite easy to use and very consistent, even if it lacks some of that lethality from our S tier pulses. Also, Outbreak can be quite dangerous in a team setting, since killing an enemy can tag their teammates with Siva nanites. In my opinion, Outbreak is the best of the lightweights, even if it's not actually lightweight. This is why I'm going to give Outbreak a bump up into the B tier. Premonition is a legendary 340 RPM pulse rifle in the energy slot, which was introduced in Shadowkeep, then sunset for one season and recently brought back. The Premonition is quite a decent pulse rifle. It occupies the most powerful 340 RPM archetype. It also has decent stats and can roll with some pretty interesting perks. The combination of slideways and high impact reserves will allow you to keep the damage boost from high impact reserves procced by partially reloading your magazine anytime you slide. This in turn will allow you to secure those 2 burst kills more consistently. Also, Premonition can roll Thresh, which synergizes nicely with a Nezarec Sin Warlock. Surplus is also an elite perk on any pulse rifle, since any amount of stacks will quite significantly buff the pulse's stability. A higher stability stat means that your shots will come grouped tighter together, and the bonus to handling and reload are really nice. All in all, the Premonition is a solid pulse rifle, which is why I'm going to rank it in the A- tier. Sacred Provenance is a 450 RPM legendary pulse rifle in the kinetic slot, but despite being 450 RPM, this one's not lightweight, it's aggressive. These aggressive 450 pulses are very special since they fire 4 shots at once instead of 3. Just like the high impact pulses, they also have the ability to kill in 2 bursts. Sacred Provenance can roll the elite perk Rapid Hit, which is only shared with the Messenger. Now the Sacred Provenance doesn't get Desperado, but still, Kill Clip is a great option. Once you activate Kill Clip, you'll have a much easier time landing 2 burst kills, which makes the Sacred Provenance a beastly 2 bursting machine. All in all, the Sacred Provenance is a fantastic choice, just shy of the Messenger. This is why I rank Sacred Provenance in the A tier. The Stars and Shadow is yet another 340 RPM high impact pulse in the energy slot. It drops after Crucible games, and it's another weapon with 12 perk options in both of the nodes. This is both good and bad, since you can get awesome combinations like Surplus and Moving Target, Killing Wind and Kill Clip, and many more. But with so many options, it's unlikely you're going to get the specific roll that you want, so RNG can be pretty brutal with this gun. Nonetheless, there are many good perk options, and the Stars and Shadow can become a fantastic pulse with the right roll. Just like the Premonition, this is an overall great weapon, but there's really nothing too special about it. That's why we're going to place it in the A- tier. Time-Worn Spire is a 540 RPM legendary pulse rifle in the kinetic slot, which was recently introduced in the Iron Banner loot pool. The rapid fire pulses require you to land 7 headshots and 2 body shots to get their optimal time to kill of 0.8 seconds. They're quite forgiving, since even if you miss the 3 burst kill, you can quickly correct to secure that kill thanks to the high rate of fire. The big problem with rapid fire pulses is that they're really bad at peak shotting. This is because they rely on your enemy being exposed for a decently long period of time. In this way, they almost function more like an auto rifle than a traditional pulse. The Time-Worn Spire has decent perks, and it comes with scope options, so you can get some pretty interesting rolls. You probably want to run a counterbalance model on this pulse to fix that base recoil direction, and after that, it's quite consistent. Unfortunately, it does lack kill clip or multi-kill clip, so your only option to get a 2 burst kill without relying on an external damage buff is with Rampage times 3, which realistically is just not going to happen all that often. All in all, I think the archetype is actually what hurts Time-Worn Spire the most, and I feel it's not quite as nice to use as the Gridskipper, which is why it lands just below it in the B tier. The Messenger is, well, the best legendary pulse rifle in the game. If you missed it, I recently reviewed this gun and explained what makes it so special. There's a link in the description if you want to check it out. The Messenger is an evolution of the former Redrix Broadsword, and it shares many of the crazy high stats with the Redrix along with the ability to roll Desperado. The Broadsword by itself was a fantastic pulse rifle which could dominate an entire PvP lobby once you got Desperado going. The Messenger takes everything the Broadsword had going for it and cranks it up even higher with some really clean sights. This pulse, simply said, occupies the deadliest archetype, has crazy stats, gets the best perks to have ever existed in the game, and brutally slaughters everything in sight. When you have Desperado going, you can outgun basically any other primary in the game and challenge fights that you normally would have no business winning. No question about it, the Messenger belongs solidly up in the S tier. The Third Axiom is a 390 RPM legendary pulse rifle in the energy slot. This pulse is basically the modernized version of the Jian 7. It has quite a bit better stats than the Jian, however it doesn't get scopes, and that means that you can't get those extreme ranges. The Third Axiom is yet another pulse that suffers from having too many perk options. Yeah, you can get some amazing combos like Surplus and multi-kill clip, but unfortunately it's very unlikely to happen unless you get really lucky. Since it's a 390 RPM pulse, I do suggest running it with a damage buff to get the most out of it. Unfortunately, thanks to the enormous perk pool, that might be unlikely to happen. All in all, I do think it's a solid pulse rifle, which can become really nice to use with the right roll, and for that reason, I'm going to rank it in the B tier. The Vigilance Wing is an exotic pulse rifle in the kinetic slot. The game classifies V-Wing as a high impact pulse, and that means it does get the benefit of having firmly planted inherently. Probably the most unique thing about this pulse rifle is that it shoots a 5-round burst. Since the burst comes out so slowly, the V-Wing's only decently good at peak shotting, however it does make up for it with that sheer damage output. You can 2-burst an opponent by landing just 5 headshots and 5 body shots for a decently fast time to kill. If you land more headshots, you can get that time down slightly, and against really low resilience guardians, you can get that down even further. Also, if you have any kind of damage buff, you aren't even required to aim for the head, since you'll be able to kill your opponent in a super forgiving 10 body shots. If your teammate dies, V-Wing also grants you a movement and healing buff, and it will give you significantly higher recovery if you're the last living member of your fire team. Even without all of these buffs, the Vigilance Wing's sheer damage output makes it an amazingly strong and consistent pulse rifle. This is why we're going to put it up in the S tier. If you made it this far into the video, first of all, thanks for sticking around. Second, I'd like to talk about how pulse rifles stack up against hand cannons. Many pulses have been popular during Destiny 2's lifespan. We had an era around Season 4 and Season 5 where pulses like the Bygones, Go Figure, and Blast Furnace were quite common to see in PvP. We also had an era of the Regic's Broadsword and its predecessor the Claymore, which were both dominant pulse rifles at the time. Pulses always lag behind hand cannons in the movement department, but they do make up for it a bit in their team shot ability and optimal time to kill. Peak shotting isn't such a problem for pulses higher on this tier list, and they can all duel hand cannons effectively when they're played at their optimal ranges. Where pulses really tend to fail is with aerial or hyper aggressive play. Generally, their inner accuracy is pretty bad in combination with their typically higher zoom stat. This can make it difficult to be precise if you're up in your enemy's face. Also, many pulses have poor handling stats, especially the high impact and aggressive archetypes. This doesn't mean that you have to camp in the back of the map. Just be aware that a skilled hand cannon user is going to have the upper hand on you if you try to assault them head on and without some kind of advantage. I think pulses offer a different flavor of gameplay. It's not really better or worse than hand cannons, just slightly different. Pulses tend to be less mobile, but sometimes stronger at shutting down longer lanes of a map with that barrage of bullets. Also, I personally find hand cannons to be a bit easier to use than pulse rifles. There's something about the mechanical ability required to perfectly track a target in conjunction with the timing of the burst that makes it just a little bit more difficult than landing a few hand cannon shots. This is especially true when you're playing opponents who move really well around a map. Hand cannons also tend to have a higher aim assist stat, which makes them a little bit easier to land shots with, and they're intrinsically better for both peak shotting and for aggressive aerial playstyles. I think another reason we don't see pulses that much is that they're kind of hard to come by. The pulses that we have currently in the game that are not tied to endgame activities are generally either on a weekly lockout like the Premonition or have 12 perks in both nodes like the Stars and Shadow, which makes it really annoying to get a god roll. We'll see how they play out in Season 15, especially with the recently adjusted range of the 120 RPM hand cannons. Speaking of hand cannons, be sure to check out my hand cannon tier list video that I did recently. It's a video on the top right of your screen and also in the description.